So this video is about transitioning out of the newbie phase and actually making some good gains. Because if you're skinny, then you probably started working out because, well, you want to build muscle and you were tired of people saying you have noodle arms. Yeah, I was pretty skinny. And so you started working out, but then maybe after a few months, maybe 4 months or 6 months, you start hitting a wall and you're wondering, why am I not making any progress? Well, as you may know, when you first start working out, you have this thing called newbie gains, where you can basically grow from doing any sort of workout, and programming doesn't really have to be on point whatsoever. But obviously, newbie gains don't last forever. At around the start of 2023, I was basically making no gains, and I'd been working out for around 6 to 8 months, but not very good training. And around this time, I discovered how to train properly, and everything was very confusing. I didn't even know what a training split was, and I'll probably put up a picture of what one of my older workouts looked like. And you don't know what you don't know, so I was kind of clueless until I started learning more, and then I discovered how to actually train more properly, and so I started making better gains. You know, people give this advice of like, just lift, bro, and also for beginners, they always say like, oh, don't really worry about the programming, just kind of get in the gym, and sure, that could work for like the first couple months, but you're really not going to be getting your best gains, and you'll soon realize that you actually do have to have a good program and know what you're doing in order to make good gains. And you probably don't want to make average gains. So when you hit this wall as a early to late beginner, you gotta realize it's not really a plateau, it's just that you're not actually training properly. And so the way to sort of break through this plateau is to just start training properly and to learn all the training variables and optimize your training. And one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people are a lot closer toward the beginner side of the spectrum than they really think. And when I say that, I say it as kind of a good thing because that means they have a lot more potential than they think. By the way, if you want one-on-one coaching with me where I'll make you a full custom program and more, then that'll be the first link in the description. Okay, so what do you need to optimize in your training and how do you actually do it? So first I'll start with relative intensity, or training close to failure basically. So ideally you want to be about 0 to 3 reps from failure, but generally I prefer 0 to 2 reps just because if you go too far from failure, then you could end up going a lot further than you thought. But if you're only like 1 rep from failure or 2 failure, then it's a lot easier to be sure that you are actually applying the proper intensity. And if you struggle with taking sets to failure, then what I recommend is just for one entire workout, just choose one set out of the whole workout and take it all the way to failure until you physically fail the last rep. Not until you think it's failure, but until the weight literally doesn't move anymore. I'll put up a video of what true failure looks like when you actually fail the rep. And believe it or not, a lot of people actually don't even train to failure, because I'm sure you've heard it like 1,000 times to train to failure, but some people just don't. And if your last rep looks like this, then that's not failure. You should actually be doing some grinder reps. The main way to tell if you're going close to failure is not by your facial expression or making grunts, but it's actually the rep speed. So if your last rep was just as fast as all the other ones, then that was not failure. Your last rep should be very slow if you're actually taking it all the way to failure. Like, you're still pushing as hard as you can, but the bar just doesn't move very fast. And if you already can train to failure, then I would say try to at least do like a few sets each workout all the way to failure just to keep yourself in check. I would say most of my training is about 0 to 1 rep in reserve. So the next thing is training split. Are you actually on a proper training split? So back when I started, I was doing these weird like circuit full body workouts like 2 times a week with like 1 set per exercise. It was just not good at all. And I'm not saying full body doesn't work. I'm just saying make sure you're on an actual split instead of just like doing random things. So usually a good training split would have each muscle being hit 2 times per week and about 2 to 3 days of rest between muscle groups. And also you want each muscle group like hit pretty well. So I'm not really a fan of full body because you're hitting all the muscles in one workout. So whatever gets put towards the end is like not really getting hit very well. And also you want to think about your volume, if you're doing too much or too little. Like my first workouts, I did not take volume into consideration whatsoever. I was just doing one set per exercise, like I said, kind of like a circuit fashion. So the next thing is technique and exercise selection. So you want to have the proper technique to hit the muscle that you're trying to target. And this involves things like full range of motion, slow eccentric, not using momentum or cheating when it's not necessary, and just overall really practicing your technique and getting good at it. And what I would recommend is for every exercise you're doing, search up the proper form and really try to perfect that form. But one thing to note is you should kind of be careful when you're searching for the form for everything, because for example, bench press, you'll probably see a lot of like powerlifting technique. So just try to make sure like you get multiple perspectives and don't fall down the route of like optimizing your leverages for powerlifting, because at the end of the day you're trying to build muscle, so you want the best technique for that. Another thing that's very important is to know what exercises and movement patterns target what muscles, and also just the function of each muscle. Like one example is thinking that hammer curls hit your biceps, and sure, like they do to some extent, but when your wrist is more pronated, that puts your bicep in a weaker position, so more of your brachialis and brachioradialis, which are other elbow flexors, they start to take over. So whenever you see these workouts on TikTok or whatever, and they're like this bicep workout and they have hammer curls and reverse curls and whatnot, that's not really hitting your bicep. And so it's good to have that knowledge to actually filter through those exercises and know what exercise hits what muscle. Another example is the rectus femoris, which is a part of your quad, and this muscle doesn't really get hit that well from doing things like squats because it's shortening at the hip whilst lengthening at the knee, because this muscle not only performs knee extension but also hip flexion. And so if you only do squat movements, then you might have an underdeveloped rectus femoris. A perfect example is Dr. Mike Israetel. He pretty much didn't do a lot of leg extensions, at least throughout his lifting career. And he said in one of his videos that because of that, he basically has no rectus femoris. And maybe if he didn't do like one leg curl and then 4 squat variations on his leg day, then he'd probably have a better developed physique and rectus femoris because of that. And so because he didn't have that knowledge earlier on, now he has to sort of play catch up with that muscle. So I think you can start to see how having a lot of knowledge is actually very beneficial, and the advice of just lift bro is not valid, at least for people who don't have top 1% genetics and are taking steroids. Another concept you should learn about is progressive overload, and I'm probably going to make another video on that because, well, my old one, I've sort of changed my views on that a little bit. Another one that's really important, which I actually only started taking seriously a little bit after I learned the other ones, is being at calorie surplus, and this is essential. Especially if you're skinny and you want to build muscle. It's only, like, not being in a calorie surplus is only going to cut it for maybe the first 6 months. If you're skinny or you just want to build muscle, don't listen to this main gaining advice. Like, you actually need to be in a decent surplus in order to optimize muscle growth. I made painfully slow gains for the first year of lifting because I never really bulked. I mean, the only muscle group I really saw a lot of growth in was my chest because I was doing a lot of push-ups. And so it's good to learn the skills like tracking calories and just learning how to bulk properly. And I have videos on both of those, so you can check those out if you want. And just remember that you'll keep learning as you go, and to never stop learning and always search for different viewpoints. Like for me, I've learned from a lot of different viewpoints, and some of them sort of contradict each other, but that's actually good to get opposing viewpoints, because then you can sort of mix them together and make your own viewpoint in the middle. You can start to see the truth more and see where some people are sort of exaggerating and sort of form your own understanding. So what I'm trying to say is basically never think that you know everything and just keep learning. By the way, if you want one-on-one coaching with me and you're someone who's trying to build muscle and you're a beginner to early intermediate, roughly 0 to 3 years of lifting, I'll make you an entire workout plan custom to you and also help you with diet and tracking calories and everything. So if you want to start taking your training seriously and taking it to the next level, then the link will be in the description. Well, that's it for the video. Start training properly, and I'll see you in the next one.